This is Cheryl.
This is Emma.
This is Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses.
Hi everyone, today we're coming to you from Quandamooka country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Quandamooka people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome back to the podcast, guys. I'm Cheryl.
I'm Emma.
I'm Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses. So today we're actually going to talk about regret. What it is, who feels it, the research on it. But first, question to you guys. Do you have any regrets?
Well, I'm just going to share.
Yes, of course.
So, speaking to the two of you, I have, it's interesting talking to people about their different experiences. So I'm learning stuff from both of you each time we get together. And sometimes I've walked away from the conversations thinking, oh my gosh, did I do enough? Or I'll sit and listen to other people talk at work and I hear other things that people have gone through and think, oh, did I do enough? So, yeah, I do. I do think I have regret, but I just have to accept the fact that I made the choices that I made that were right for us at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Catherine?
Look, sometimes yes, but for the majority of the time, no. Like Emma said, I think I've made the choices that were right for me, and now I'm just accepting that I've made those choices and my time for having children is long gone now, and we can just move on and explore new avenues now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I definitely have regrets. I think it's mostly actually doing all the fertility treatments. I sort of feel like I wasted years of my life on it. Yeah, but actually, I think that, this is going to be an interesting episode. I think, I do have regrets about doing the treatments, but I also have regrets about the way that we went about it. It wasn't done very aggressively initially. It was very blasé. They kind of just, and I kind of just went with the flow. But I mean, as you guys have said, you have to make peace with it and sort of look to the future. But I've given you each a piece of paper and a pen, because we're going to be doing a couple of activities for this episode as well. And for anyone who's listening, you're welcome to join us. So I would like you to write down your biggest regrets in life. It doesn't have to be related to infertility. It could be just anything. You don't have to share. It doesn't matter what they are. You can just write down what are some of your biggest regrets.
Okay. We're going to put some thinking music on here.
The reason I actually wanted to do this episode is because one of the most common things people tell child-free people, and sometimes definitely childless people as well, who walk away from growing their family, is that they will come to regret the decision.
Yes, true. You know, something this may be off topic that's just come to mind is I'm older, as I've said before, but I see people like Sonia Kruger, who got pregnant at 48, donor egg. Janet Jackson, had a baby at 50. There's an actress who's recently had a baby at 48.
Oh gosh, yeah.
As well.
Yep.
So sometimes those stories make me question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it really too late?
Yep. We've spoken about this before, but I felt pressure about not doing enough. And you do kind of fear if you're going to regret it in the future. It's like this, you just kind of worry about it, or at least I do, that you're just going to be looking back at yourself in 10 years and go, oh, did I actually do enough? Or or like, I wish I had done more. But I think that, yeah, I mean, as like the psychologist that I spoke to after the treatments, they said, you know, you've done more than most people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my question is there truth to this? Do child-free people come to regret their decision later? Or do childless people have regrets? And do parents actually have regrets? I think, like you guys and the listeners might be surprised by what I've found. So what do studies say about this? The easiest way to probably quantify this is studies on happiness. There have been a lot of studies all around the world on which cohort is happiest and which has more regrets. Child-free or childless people or parents, whether men, women, single or in a couple. The results do vary a lot depending on metrics and country, but some studies also contradict one another. So let's take a look at the studies on regret. There was a Michigan study done in the US in 2023. It was like a small study though. In this state, they have a surprisingly large number of child-free people. It's like 1 in 5 people. This study found that older child-free adults do not experience more life regret than older parents. In fact, older parents were just slightly more likely to want to change aspects of their lives than child-free people, but there was no statistically significant difference in the level of regret found between parents and child-free people.
Very interesting, because if you listen to the noise on social media,
Yes.
they'll tell you a very different story. I see child-free accounts that are very much criticised and crucified for choosing that lifestyle, and it is the people with kids who seem to be persecuting them
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
most.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Again, this was a small study that looked at just one state. So it's hard to say if this is really accurate for people across the board. So this isn't really replicated in other studies either. For example, Bronwyn Harmon, an Australian University lecturer in psychology and social science, did an anonymous online survey in Australia of 559 child-free and childless people over 35. This one found that about 1 in 4 child-free people over 50 had regrets about not having kids. So this is child-free people, so people who never wanted children. And this tended to be single people who felt lonely. So I thought that was quite interesting. It doesn't really match what the other study found, but again, it was a very small study and most people didn't have regrets. This is a large number compared to other studies where it's estimated that only about 2 to 3% of child-free people have regrets, but again, most did not have regrets, and this was a small survey. This survey also found that women received more negative comments than men, although men did receive some, so more criticism for being a child-free woman. So to balance this out, let's take a look at parental regret. So the British YouGov data from 2021 showed that 8% of British parents regret having kids. Similarly, a 2013 Gallup survey showed that 7% of American parents older than 45 said they wouldn't have kids if they could have a do-over. And in Germany, a 2016 YouGov study found that a whopping 19% of mothers and 20% of fathers regret having kids.
Interesting.
That is really interesting, but it's also not surprising.
Yes.
Did they give any reason for why?
They did not, but I will probably get more into details about what could be behind this. Being a regretful parent is still very much a taboo, though. So if you think about that,
that's true.
Might not be the full spectrum of people who have regrets. There have been more people speaking up about it, yes, but people who admit to regret face a lot of backlash. So this is only the people brave enough to admit to it. Then the numbers could be higher. Now, studies on happiness give us even more clear of a picture on why people may be regretting their decisions. In the US, the General Social Survey does an annual or biannual survey with sample sizes of about 14,000 adults between ages of 50 to 70, so pretty good sizes. These surveys have shown that older parents with children still living at home are less happy than empty nesters by 5 to 6%. They also found that having children at home make men less happy, but just being a parent has no real impact on a man's happiness. Meanwhile, for women, having kids declines their happiness by 3 to 4%, whether they're at home or not. And women with only one kid are 7% less likely to say they are very happy compared to women without kids.
Wow. Okay.
That's surprising.
That is.
Yep. Women with 2 kids were 4% less likely to say they are very happy, while there is not statistically significant difference between women without kids and women with 3 or more kids.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, so it seems like people with 3 or more kids, they are a lot happier. I mean, that might be because, in order to have 3 children, you really would really need to want to have.
Yeah.
You must really love being a parent. So I think that's kind of significant. And usually there is a lot of pressure for parents to have more than one child, so it makes sense. Kids also reduce marital happiness for women by 6 to 8%, but not for men. But when the kids still are at home, then marital happiness is reduced for both.
I find that a little bit surprising. Like, I have heard about men kind of feeling displaced when the children come along because the wife doesn't have so much time and energy for the husband.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
68% of women without children report happiness in marriage compared to 54% of mothers. So it's quite interesting. However, all this hinges a lot on which country you live in. Studies show that the parental happiness penalty varies a lot between countries, with places like Norway, Portugal, Finland, Sweden, Spain and Hungary having happier parents than people without kids, and places like the US, UK, Ireland, Australia and New Zealand having people without kids being happier.
Really?
Wow. Okay.
US actually had one of the biggest gaps in happiness. This kind of shows that in places where parents are better supported with things like free childcare and generous parental leave, or just better welfare policies in general, parents lead happier lives than non-parents.
Interesting.
Yeah, it would make sense though if
Yeah.
you had a better support system.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then it would certainly give you a different experience.
Yeah, and I mean, in places like, Sweden and Norway and things like that, they do have very, very good parental leave systems for both the man and the woman.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that kind of makes sense to me. In 2021, CNBC News article, in a 2021 CNBC News article, a professor of sociology at the University of Texas, Jennifer Glass, explained that parents have a happiness bump when a baby is born, which dissipates over time, while non-parents generally grow happier over time, diverging from parents. She said that life without children is also much more stable, as a Princeton University and Stony Brook University study found that parents and non-parents have similar levels of life satisfaction, but parents experience more daily joy and more daily stress.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
In yet another study from Santa Clara University, it was found that parents become happier over time than non-parents due to increased social connection and well-being. So, yeah, research findings are really mixed.
Yeah.
Again, however, it showed parents had higher highs and lower lows.
Yeah.
To counter all this, in 2019, the professor of behavioural science at the London School of Economics, Paul Dolan, said that the latest evidence shows that women who never married and never had children were the happiest subgroup of all, and that men benefit from marriage more, as it made them take fewer risks, while married women were more likely to experience physical and mental ill health.
Whoa.
Yep.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Very interesting. And I think this kind of will tie into some other findings that I found later on, which I'll probably circle back onto this fact, but it is quite interesting. Through all my research for this, there wasn't a whole lot of focus on the childless people, though. So people who wanted kids but didn't end up having them. However, I did find some research by Thomas Hansen at the Norwegian Social Research Nova Institute at OsloMet. His 2021 research indicated that there was a little difference in loneliness, life satisfaction, and mental health between parents and non-parents, both amongst younger and older adults. Mm-hmm. He said that this does vary from country to country, though based on what social support systems there are, and that in places of low social support, parents raising young children and elderly people without children tend to fare far worse than places like Norway, where both groups have similar levels of happiness. He also said that the childless people do tend to recover from their lasting sense of loss and adapt, most finding other sources of meaning, connection, and support.
Hooray!
Yes!
That's good to know.
It is. I thought that was quite heartening to hear, because you do so often in the media, we're portrayed as like these sad cases that will never recover. But yeah, he does say that most people will recover and actually lead very full, happy lives. So at this point, I'd like you to read out some real life examples of people who are parents, child-free and childless, who have regrets, which you guys might find quite enlightening.
Okay.
All these examples come from anonymous Redditors, so on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is telling or not, but there weren't many child-free examples. It's possible because there would be backlash from child-free peers, but it could also be that it's just less common to have a regret as a child-free person, which the research does back up.
Mm-hmm.
So this post is actually from someone talking about their friend's aunt. The aunt of a friend of mine regrets never having kids. However, it's very obvious that she is jealous of all her friends and family's adult children they can be friends with now. She wants the cool, successful adult that can come visit and be bragged about. And she wants the cool... and not everyone even gets that. She wasn't stable when she was in that age where she could have kids. And she didn't want them back then. So I just don't think it's actual regret about not having kids. It's just weird jealousy of the adult friendships that eventually formed. And then this one is a childless person talking about regretting infertility treatments. I regret that I didn't stop earlier. I feel that I'm finally getting my life back. I regret not going to grad school earlier because every year I had the hope that this will be the year, or I spent thousands on treatments. It's been 10 years since I graduated college, and since then I've been hoping. After 2 miscarriages and years of treatments, I don't want to live in the what if. This pandemic made me realise life is too short to waste on that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very relatable.
Yeah, very relatable.
So now I have a parent's regret from the subreddit Regretful Parents. A very interesting, enlightening subreddit if you guys are ever interested. I have one 8-year-old. We went through IVF to have her. So I knew having only one child was a possibility. But I knew fairly quickly that I did not enjoy motherhood. I always hoped it would get better, and while it is easier in some ways, I have zero desire for another child, even though I could do IVF again. She's a good kid, sweet, kind, smart. I love her to pieces, but I miss having time to myself. I do get some, but not nearly enough, and because it's just her, she's constantly chattering. So we know people often say to people without kids that they should have kids to avoid becoming old and lonely, and they'll regret it if they don't.
Yeah.
So I thought, what are the regrets of the dying?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question, really.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, if you're, on your deathbed and you're thinking over your life, I don't think necessarily that your main regret will be whether or not you didn't have kids, or whether or not you didn't eat that Vegemite on toast for breakfast.
Exactly.
I think there's going to be a lot more things on your mind than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you know, for me, on my deathbed, I just want to feel that I made a positive difference.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically I ended up reading this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. In the book, Bronnie talks about quitting an unfulfilling yet successful job in banking and working as an aged care worker in rural Australia, where she took care of many clients before they passed away. In her time doing this, many clients talked about their lives and their regrets, although she said some clients said they didn't have any regrets, which made her want to basically find out how she could live a life without regret. Her first story is of a woman called Grace who was in a bad relationship for many years but didn't have the courage to leave. She expressed disappointment at needing to wait until her old age to be free and independent, and told Bronnie of her regret of not living true to her heart and worrying too much about what others would think of her leaving her unhappy marriage. So she wasn't in a happy relationship. She really, obviously she was waiting to be free from this marriage, but it only came on her deathbed. She said, this sets up the first most common regret of the dying. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think kind of relates to the single women who've never been married and never had kids, them being the happiest cohort, because they do live life on their own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes wonder if I had more examples of living life without children.
Yeah.
If I'd seen lots of different things, would I have felt differently about all that as well?
I think so, yeah. I mean, because the only happy story we're told is people with kids, people with families, you're not told about the happy lives of the single person that's maybe traveling the world and, doing volunteer work or, there's so many other stories out there, but
That's
we're only
right.
told one side.
That's how I feel.
Yeah,
and
that's
there's
right.
plenty of people living so many different experiences.
There are, but I think as a society, especially for women, we're socialised to believe that our role is to nurture. And then when we don't have kids, then people expect of us that we're going to nurture in other ways. So, if we don't have kids, they'll question why not. If we don't have pets, they'll question why not. And obviously because you don't have kids, you're going to have regrets because kids are the pathway to happiness as a female and as a society. And then who's going to look after us when we are on our deathbed? Which is a very interesting question, but only because how many people can truly say that they have cared for their parents as they die or as they're dying?
Yes,
And I think, a lot of people, they want to have kids or didn't have kids, and they're very well aware of what their options are when it comes to end of life. But those with kids,
they depend on it.
They do depend on it, but at the same time, they think, I'm going to have kids, so I'll have somebody to care for me when I'm older. But it's unrealistic for them to expect their children to take on that role.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of elderly people who are in care and they don't have that.
No, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I recently read something about a woman who lived to be beyond 100. She was a woman without children, but she had invested her money in such a way that she could afford to have a carer 24/7. So lucky her.
Yeah, definitely. I think, so the story that defines the next most common regret is about a man named John, who told Bronnie about how he had always been really busy working to try and provide for his family, which also led him to missing out on a great deal from his family. His wife had talked to him about travelling and doing the things they always wanted to do for many years now that their kids had left home, and had been pushing him to retire so they could experience it together while they were still fit and healthy. He kept delaying it, telling her, no, just one more year, until he finally said, okay, I'll retire at the end of this year. But unfortunately, 3 months before he was due to retire, his wife died. So the second most common regret was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So then Bronnie also talks about an elderly client who never expressed his feelings of love to his son, which led his son to work himself ragged in an effort to gain his father's approval. When he finally told his son that he loved him on his deathbed, after Bronnie spoke to him about what she had observed, the son was able to start leading a simpler life, more true to himself, and spend more time with his loved ones. This relates to the third regret. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. The fourth regret was, I wish I had stayed in touch with friends. Now, this one is an interesting one. So Bronnie related this to the story of an elderly woman who had lovingly raised her daughter who'd now moved overseas and was living in Japan. Of this, the woman said, she has her own life now, and I learned over the years you just have to let go. I brought her into the world, but we do not own our children. We are just blessed with the role of guiding them until they can fly on their own, and that is what she is doing now.
Love that. Yeah.
This woman, she had a very good relationship with her daughter, but she was living overseas. But I found this interesting because the woman was lonely. She talked about being very lonely, but she did not miss her daughter. It was actually her friends that she missed.
Wow.
Bronnie said that the woman had lost contact with her friends, and Bronnie endeavoured to help her regain contact with them, which she actually eventually did do, but it was unfortunate that was just before she died. The final regret was, I wish I had let myself be happier, which Bronnie said was about people getting in their own ways and not allowing themselves to be happy. She said her elderly clients forgave themselves for their mistakes, and it taught her that there is a lot of learning in life, some of it bringing suffering and some of it happiness, and that often we just have to remind ourselves that tough times will pass and good will come. It also taught her to have courage to live the life she wants, not what others want, and to be honest about her feelings and find balance in her life. Ultimately, she hoped she would be like her clients who didn't have regrets. So this kind of brought me to my next question. How do we end up with regrets? How common is regret? Is there anything else we can do to prevent it? And this brings me to the extensive research of Daniel Pink. He wrote a book, The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. I unfortunately didn't get hold of the book in time, but I did read a lot of articles, listen to a lot of podcasts about his research, and it was quite interesting. He conducted a world regret survey, which collated over 23,000 regrets from people around the world. He was inspired to look deeper into regret when he got to a stage in his life where he looked back and realised he had regrets himself. But we live in a culture where people say they want to live a life of no regrets, and that admitting to regrets or any negative feelings is a sign of weakness or bad character in some way, or it just makes people feel uncomfortable. Considering this, what he found was quite surprising. Of the people he surveyed, only 1% said they never look back on life and wish they had done something differently, while 83% said they did so occasionally. Through his research, he found that the only people without regrets were 5-year-olds or younger, people with lesions on particular parts of their brains, people with Parkinson's or Huntington's, or sociopaths.
Wow.
That means that regret is a normal part of life. It's a universal feeling and experience that serves an evolutionary purpose in our survival as a species. He even stated that the most common emotion we feel is regret, followed by love. Yeah, so now he did differentiate between productive regret and unproductive regret. So productive regret is basically where you kind of look at regret and you take a lesson from it. So say you regret never speaking to your friend again, and you kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to start a conversation with them. I'm going to reconnect. Unproductive regret. So that was productive regret. Unproductive regret is just when you sort of ruminate on it and you kind of sit in the feelings, you just beat yourself up about it. And the way to get to a more productive version of regret is just to have self-compassion.
Yeah.
So regret is a good teacher, he says, for showing you what you value. At this point, I want you guys to look back at what you wrote and have a look at what it actually says about what you value in life. Basically, he says our regrets kind of teach us what we value, and we can sort of work towards bringing that value back into our life. Yeah, so you can sort of use it as a way to reverse your mistake or guide your life going forward. And some regrets can't be reversed. Like sometimes, you regret not talking to a friend, but then they pass away and there's no going back. But there are going to be open door regrets, as he says, where you can sort of make a change and go back and try and amend. For the closed door regrets, it's just all about having self-compassion.
Yeah.
In his research, he categorized all the regrets into 4 types. Foundation regrets, which are summed up as, if only I had done the work. Boldness regrets, which are summed up as, if only I'd taken the chance. Moral regrets, if only I'd done the right thing. And connection regrets, if only I'd reached out. He also found that inaction regrets are in general twice as prevalent as action regrets from your 30s onwards, while young people usually have equal amounts of action versus inaction regrets. So like an action regret is wishing that you hadn't done something. So like say, for example, you cut off your friend that you were talking to, you wish that you hadn't done that. Whereas an inaction regret is wishing that you had done something that you didn't do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have regrets that you're struggling to deal with, Daniel Pink has a few suggestions. Disclose so your feelings, so share your feelings because this actually helps unburden you and makes it feel less scary. Give yourself self-compassion, so talk to yourself as if you're your own best friend. And allow distance to zoom out and realise that you're not alone. Another thing I found interesting is that there were 4 similar studies done on regret that actually showed that as humans, we tend to overestimate the appeal of the second choice or the choice we didn't make.
Yeah, that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like the grass is always greener kind of analogy.
Yeah.
They did an experiment where they made people choose between 2 options. I think it was blurry faces, and they asked them to choose which one was more attractive. The people made their choices, and half were shown the unblurred faces, whereas the other half were not. What they found was that the still blurred group regretted their choice way more. So it sort of says that we kind of over-idealise the choices we don't take.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, the research for this podcast episode was really hard for me because it did plunge me in a bit of a spiral. I feel like I have a fear of regret.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much, I'm not afraid of like having regrets, more having future regrets. So one of the things that I really struggled with coming out of infertility treatments last year was worrying if I'd regret not doing enough. Now you guys know that in fact we did a lot and it really took its toll on us, like we did all we could.
Yeah.
But this all kind of made that fear resurface. I even went as far as to ask older people in our childless community whether they have regrets and got mixed responses. But none of that really mattered because everyone's feelings and experiences were valuable to them, but I could fall into either camp. Like I don't know which side I'll fall into in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What I did find interesting was that I noticed that I was really looking for that permission to just live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you guys relate to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. And just permission to have a different experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. So this actually led me into looking into the fear of regret or fear of missing out. So how can people like me who fear regret deal with it, and how can we reassure ourselves that we made the right decision for us? I read a helpful Psychology Today article about making decisions. It basically said that challenging decisions arise when core values are in opposition. It also said that it can help to think of a decision you make as the best decision under the circumstances rather than the right or wrong decision. If you're having problems with making a difficult decision, you can break down the decision according to your core values, thinking why these values matter to you, and asking if it is okay if one of these core values are challenged. And making a decision doesn't mean you have to be fully confident in it. It is normal to sometimes have doubts, look back, kind of question yourself. That's completely human, normal. Which brings me to my final point, how society plays into fear of regret. I think the reason I went into a spiral is because I was reading about the things people say to women without kids. The criticism, judgment, and reiteration that we will regret having kids and be lonely is absolutely relentless. The pressure from a pro-natalist society is everywhere, especially for women.
Yeah.
The message they send to us of we'll be miserable and we don't matter unless we're mothers is so incredibly unhelpful, and this fear-mongering around regret that sent me into a panic personally is just so toxic. And from what we've seen, it's completely unfounded. Everyone has regret, and it's not the scary thing that people make it into.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If I and other women like me, whether childless or even child-free, listen to this panic, it does nothing to serve us. There is no acknowledgement or compassion in that, or as to where a woman may be at in her life or what she values. I mean, having kids is not for everyone. There are a lot of people out there who just don't want them. So I'm giving myself the permission to live and love my life, and if there is anyone else out there really on the fence or really not wanting to continue with infertility treatments, give yourself the permission you deserve to stop. Your life won't be as awful as they make it out. If anything, this has taught me everyone is suffering in one way or another, and it's just what we make of that suffering that matters. Finding joy where you can and enjoying what you do have is enough. In our society, women are refused to exist unless we have children, and I say screw that. We exist, and we're awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right there, Cheryl. I think it's really good if we just enjoy the little things in each day as they come by, and just notice those little things and find joy in those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what sort of I got from the books as well, is that they were more about having regrets about, not connecting with your friends, not keeping in touch with them, not being honest about your feelings. And I think that's quite important, that we just make the most of what we have rather than thinking about,
what we don't.
Yeah.
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 Well, that's what they say, isn't it? What you focus on expands. So
Yeah.
if you're focusing on the blessings, focusing what you do have, then of course you're going to feel better.
Yeah, and I mean, the story about the one woman with her daughter living in Japan, it just kind of highlights that, people expect a lot from their children.
They do.
Like, your child isn't there to create a relationship with you so that they can just service you and make you happy and emotionally well and everything. They're there to grow up and then lead their own lives.
That's right. I've heard it said that they come through you, but not to you.
Yes. Yeah.
So what a wow, that's very, very impressive of that woman, because you don't hear many people say that. So good on her.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess what I take away from this is we should all endeavour to have courage, to just be ourselves, live our true lives, be honest about our feelings, find balance, and you will do things that you regret. Everyone feels regret, it's a very common feeling. Just don't beat yourself up about it. That's basically it.
Yeah, and like you brought up, it's not about getting it right. It's kind of just living your best life, isn't it?
Yeah, because there is no right or wrong. It's just taking the path that's best for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please let us know what you think, and all the research and everything that I've done is all in the show notes for you guys. Thanks. See you guys next time.
Thanks for listening. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram, The Baronesses Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or comments or would like to be a guest in our show, drop us an email, baronessespod@gmail.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.